Hey, it's Pete Mundo. Before the podcast starts, could you do us a favor at KCMO? We don't ask you for much outside of supporting our sponsors and advertisers. Could you leave us a 5-star rating and review? Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Helps us a lot. We so appreciate you doing that. I sure hope it works. I really do. Good morning, 6:05. It is great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, a much calmer morning than what we woke up to yesterday here in Kansas City. I am pulling so hard for President Trump's tariff plan to work. I want it to work. I want it to be the American economic boom that many of us are hoping it will turn into. For all levels of the economy, for the working poor, for the middle class, for the upper middle class, and it seems like those at the very high end will typically always do pretty well. Do I have questions? Do I have some concerns? Yeah, I do. Sure. But it's a high-stakes game of poker that Donald Trump is playing right now. He has had this vision for the American economy. Frankly, going back 40 years at this point, you can find interviews with President Trump going back to at least the late 80s, where he talks about the exact economic vision that he implemented yesterday. And what he did is impose 10% tariffs on all countries across the board. And he then imposed an individualized reciprocal higher tariff on the countries with which the United States has the largest trade deficits. And those tariffs are going to remain in effect until such a time, and I'm reading this from whitehouse.gov, as President Trump determines that the threat posed by the trade deficit and underlying non-reciprocal treatment is satisfied, resolved, or mitigated. What does that mean? Basically, if the other countries that we deal with and work with decide that, you know what, maybe we should knock these tariffs off on American imports, then I think we've got truly free and fair trade. And I believe that is Donald Trump's ultimate goal. True, free, and fair trade instead of these countries charging us an arm and a leg to import into their countries while we do nothing when it comes to their imports into the United States. And guess what? A big part of Donald Trump's plan here is that he believes that in the end we will win because these countries need us much more than we need them. That's his estimation. Now, there are some problems in our economy and in our job market that I'll get to here in a second. But that's the bet that he's making right now. He's looking at these numbers and he's saying, okay, wait, trade accounts for 73% of Mexico's GDP, 67% of Canada's GDP, and 37% of China's GDP. It only accounts for 24% of the United States' GDP. So these countries rely on trade as a percentage of their GDP far more than we do. And he's basically saying this will pain and cause more pain for them than it will for us. And in the end, I will get what I want on behalf of the American people, the American taxpayer, and yes, the American voter. And this will build up the middle class. It will shrink the gap between the haves and the have-nots in this country. And the reality is the middle class in America has been getting hollowed out for a long time, but it's really been on steroids for the last 15 years. It's gotten worse since the stock market has just skyrocketed going back to the bottom of the 2009 recession. You look at where things have gone since then, you've seen 3-4x your money. A lot of that driven by, of course, printing of money that we don't have that has helped goose the stock market, and also just the understanding that the American economy is the best bet in the world. But the underlying theme here is that the middle class has not been able to keep up. So Donald Trump's gamble here is that this will bring jobs back to America. If nothing else, it will also force companies, or shall we say encourage companies, to want to do more business and set up more of their business infrastructure in the United States. And then also the hope here for the president is that in the end, if these other countries start dropping some of the tariffs they have on us, it will allow American business to explode. The questions, though, surround whether or not we actually have the workforce for some of the manufacturing that he wants to bring back to the United States. You know, Mike Rowe, the dirty jobs guy, he's outstanding. I mean, he has been talking about the lack of trade-skilled American citizens for years now in this country. We took wood shop out of high school years ago. We're not encouraging young people, especially young men, to consider the trades. We're sending them to dopey colleges where they learn absolutely nothing, come out with no skills and $100,000 in debt. Like, he's been on this for years. But the reality is we still need thousands, tens of thousands of trade workers in this country today. Are we magically going to create an economy overnight where suddenly manufacturing is booming, where that skill set is suddenly able to be met? We right now don't have the skill sets of workers to meet the demands that we have in a lot of blue-collar jobs. So that's the part of the equation that I admit I'm a little concerned about, because that takes years to develop. We didn't get to where we are today, where there are tens of thousands of trade jobs open and no one to fill them overnight, or 5 years, or even 10 years. I mean, that's a generational change that has to happen in America and is going to take time to develop. So while I appreciate the goal here, and man, do I want it to work, because if it works, it will be a game changer for this administration. It will be a game changer for the Republican Party. And it will be one of the most important things to happen in the American economy in a century. It will revert back to being a middle-class driven economy if it works. But it could be a big if. If the tariffs just end up increasing prices, that increases inflation. That then is not something the American people want right now when they have record levels of consumer debt. And then 2026 becomes a Democratic landslide the other way if there is more economic turmoil. That's the downside here. But you know what? Trump ran on this. None of this is a surprise, right? People voted for this. I voted for Trump for a third time, knowing full well that he liked these tariffs and this was going to be a part of his economic agenda. So I'm standing by it because it's not new. It's nothing different than what he talked about. But as we talked about during the campaign leading up to the election, it was one of those things that was going to come with some risk. Even Trump would likely admit that privately. It's coming with some risk. And that's okay. You just have to be prepared to pivot. But Trump's attitude here is we've got a lot more leverage than the rest of the world. And that is indisputable. There's no argument there. He's absolutely right. We have more leverage than the rest of the world. The question is, do these companies want to bring some of these businesses back to the American soil? Or even with the tariffs in place, is it still cheaper for them to do their business out of China, Taiwan, Vietnam, and elsewhere? And that remains to be seen. 913-408-7957. That is how you join us right now on KCMO Talk Radio. But I know, certain industries are going to do well, have a chance to benefit greatly from this. You heard from various people yesterday at the White House who were very high on these plans, on these tariffs, and hoping that it's going to work out for everybody here. And that's what we should all want right now. Coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio, there is a push on what I believe is the most important vote in Kansas City in years. It's not for a politician. It's not for a mayor. It's not for anything like that. I will tell you what that vote is, why it matters, and who's coming out against it. Next on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. Well, speaking of these tariffs, Liz Clayman, Fox Business Network, will join the show at 7:05 this morning. That is 45 minutes away. We also have the Dave Ramsey ticket. Speaking of money, the Money and Marriage Tour, Dave Ramsey and Dr. John Deloney, comes to Kansas City on Friday, May 9th. So do not miss that. And we have your chance to win tickets at 7:45. And we have a pair of VIP tickets as well. One of our winners will get to meet Dave and John Deloney backstage. That's at 7:45 this morning. So on Tuesday, Kansas City will go to the polls and will vote on a jail tax, as it's being called. This is a no-brainer yes vote. Basically what this is an extension of a public safety sales tax by 20 years. It's not a new tax. It's an extension of a tax that's already in place. And what they will do is use about $250 million of this sales tax to construct a city jail. Of course, the city has not had a jail in about 10 years. And wow, what's magically happened? Crime has skyrocketed. Now, it's not black and white enough to say that the crime has skyrocketed over the last decade in Kansas City exclusively because we do not have a jail, but it certainly has not helped the cause at all. You combine the defund the police movement, the way the cops in this town did not trust the prosecutor for the last 10 years. You throw in and add in the way that law enforcement in general has been neutered in too many cases, on top of the fact that, yes, there is no jail, and that's how you end up with Kansas City setting record homicide numbers over the last few years. That's how you get there. But a jail would help. I mean, we've got a new prosecutor in Melissa Johnson. We will pull for her and root for her and give her a chance and hope that she does a great job. And she's only 2 months into it, so it's too early to tell. But obviously, we think that she's doing some things that'll get Jackson County, which, of course, engulfs a large part of Kansas City, Missouri proper, on the right track where a lot of these homicides are taking place. But having a jail, a holding place for criminals for at least a day is a great place and a necessary place to start. And here are the groups who are coming out against it. I know this will shock you, but the Urban Council in Kansas City has come out against what they're calling the jail tax next week.
Talk about a bombshell.
Mayor Lucas will be here at 7:30. I will ask him about this. The Urban Council has delivered a forceful denunciation of the proposed public safety sales tax, known by critics as the jail tax. See, I would use that phrase as a positive. I'm here to I'll call it the jail tax because we need a jail. This is not difficult. This is not controversial. So I will gladly use their verbiage in this case. Normally, I won't do it. Like, I won't call a guy who wants to be a chick. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to call a man a woman because he thinks he's a woman today. And that will make many on the left upset. But I will call this the jail tax because I think that's a compliment. There's a lot of things that we waste our tax money on. Building a jail is actually not one of them. You kind of need a jail. I'm down to have a jail. Kansas City hasn't had one in a decade. So the Urban Council puts out a statement here this week that reads, "This measure is badly planned, fiscally irresponsible, unsustainable, unjust to the poor, and abandons the people and sectors of Kansas City who need the investment the most to really prevent crime and improve public safety." Listen, we tried your woke nonsense in 2020, 2021, into 2022. And more people got killed than ever before in this town over that 3 to 4 year period. We set multiple homicide records. We tried your woke crap and it failed. Doubling down on it is not the answer. On top of that, I love how they say here that a jail is unjust to the poor. Where do you think the criminals are? The criminals who are running wild around Kansas City because you have cops who are a little bit hands off because they don't know who to trust. And, you've got also police who are like, I don't know if I can trust the prosecutor, so why am I going to put my life on the line for some of these thugs and criminals? Where do you think they're doing most of their business? Where do you think they're killing people? Ward Parkway? Plaza? No, it's not there. It's in the backyards of the working poor, who, if they could, would get out of their neighborhoods yesterday, but they can't afford to. It is not unjust to the poor to build a jail. You know what it is? It's actually beneficial to the poor to build a jail. It's beneficial to the working poor, the people who desperately would want to get out of their communities and get out of their situations, and many are trying their hardest to. They just can't afford it yet. They're working multiple jobs. Not all of them. I know some people are just kind of going to be stuck in their demographic trends because, frankly, they may not want to hustle in too many cases. But there's a lot of really hardworking people who are trying to improve their lot in life, and they don't deserve what these woke urban councils and woke city council members are trying to push on Kansas City. This is a no-brainer yes vote coming up on Tuesday. And if you needed further proof of that, well, the urban council coming out against it and calling it the jail tax is the perfect example of why we need it and why Kansas City should want it. It's a no-brainer. On the text line, Pete, if this is an extension of a tax that's already being done, what have they been wasting the money on the last 10 years instead of building a jail? That's a fair question. I'll ask the mayor about that. I will. I'll bring that up to him next hour. I mean, what they would say is it's public safety. They would say it's, I don't know. I'll ask them because that's a very fair question. Where has that money been going thus far? What does it go to? How has it been spent? And what results do you have to show for it? All very fair points to bring up. So I will make sure I bring that up to the mayor at 7:30. Where has that money been going? But I come to the conclusion of better late than never. Okay? Yeah, in a perfect world, we would not have gone 10 years without a jail. And there's a multitude of reasons for why this happened. But we're shipping, inmates out to Vernon County, Missouri, Johnson County, Missouri. That can't continue. And if this tax passes on Tuesday, it won't. 913-408-7957. We have an update after the debacle that has been the assessments on one side of our state line. We'll share with you next. 6:35, good morning. It is great to be here on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. So the huge story of the week in this community is what happened a couple of days ago in Jackson County when a judge ruled that the county has to roll back all property assessments to a 15% maximum increase. And this goes back to the 2023 disastrous assessment that we have covered for the better part of 18 months now. So the fallout of this is what? Well, we don't really know, but we do know that already certain entities who have made a lot of money off of these what appear to be illegal property assessments from 2 years ago are crying poor. And color me shocked. Fox 4 had the story. Assessment ruling could have an $18 million impact on KCPS, Kansas City Public Schools. And they spoke with Dr. Jennifer Collier, superintendent of KCPS, after a ribbon cutting yesterday. And they asked whether Tuesday's ruling could impact the amount of projects the district's able to do if voters approve Tuesday's bond. And Dr. Collier told Fox 4 here, we're hoping not, but potentially it could, depending on how things play out. She says we're watching it. As soon as we know what the impact will be, if there would be one, we are definitely going to share that with the public because we think it's important for people to know. So what they're saying here is basically, yes, it is possible that Kansas City Public Schools could have an $18 million impact if these property assessments have to be rolled back to 15% maximum increases from 2 years ago. But here's the problem KCPS made, and this was noted yesterday on the show by David Stokes, when he said KCPS chose to not lower its mill levy. Remember, it's not just about the assessment increases that determine your property taxes. If your assessment goes up 15%, it doesn't mean your property taxes necessarily have to go up 15%. Now, if they don't change the mill levy, when it comes to your schools, when it comes to your cities, when it comes to your county, then yes, I mean, everything across the board would theoretically go up 15%. But here's what you see these counties and cities do. And this is like, I'm bouncing around the dial yesterday, and it's amazing how many people in this town who do this for a living don't understand this. They don't get it. I was listening to a show yesterday. I'm just bouncing around that rhymes with Pena and Darks. And like they're like, oh, well, if we roll it back to 15%, well, then everyone's property taxes are only up 15% instead of like 20 or 30. It's like, no, that's not how this works. The calculation is not just the assessment increase. Then there's a mill levy that gets determined by the city, the school, and the county. And that is how the property tax increase is calculated. It's like, I don't know what they're good at outside of telling bad boomer jokes. But clearly this is way above their pay grade. So what then happens is the cities, the municipalities, the counties, and the schools decide, hey, our mill levy is going to be X. We're going to lower our mill levy. And that's how these counties and cities get away with this, right? Your property values keep going up, and then they pat themselves on the back and they say, don't worry, your mill levy's coming down. But what they do is they still get a lot more money, right? So they may get 5% more money out of you, even if your assessment's up 15%. And then they act like they're doing you a favor, which they're not. They're still screwing you out of more money than they should be taking. But they get to look like the good guys here. Don't worry, the mill levy's coming down. Okay, yeah, but you're still taking 5-10% more of my money from my property taxes than you were a year or two ago. So that's the game. That's how it's played. And Kansas City Public Schools, well, they elected to not play that game. And David Stokes talked about that yesterday on the show when he noted, like, they could have lowered the mill levy. They didn't have to, and they chose not to. So I don't have a lot of sympathy. And here's the kicker, too. Coming up on Tuesday, there is a vote in Kansas City to give more money to the Kansas City Public Schools. That is coming up on April 8th. So that's right around the corner. So that's also a backstory here where they've got these GO bonds, GO bonds coming up, general obligation bonds coming up on April 8th that they want you to vote for. And what would this do? Well, it would increase property taxes for an owner of a $200,000 property by $231 a year. Now, I would vote no on this if I was a Kansas City resident. I would vote no on this because I'm looking at a school district that is continuing to get more and more money, and I'm not seeing the results. The results are not there. Now, the mayor has backed it. We'll ask him about that coming up in an hour as well here on KCMO Talk Radio. But I have yet to see them do a good job in terms of being stewards of the taxpayer dollars in the Kansas City Public Schools. And this goes back, a generation, right? This goes back to, decades before I was here in some cases where they gave the school district hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and the results just don't back it up. They don't justify the monies that they're getting. So all this is part of the equation when you look at the Kansas City Public Schools as a whole. They could potentially get some money drawn back from the assessment decision that came down this week from a judge. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet or how that's going to play out. And then you have this vote coming up on April 8th. Now, odds are it will pass. Right, it's very unlikely that a general obligation school bond is going to go up in flames because don't you care about the kids? That's always how it goes. We saw that in Gardner Edgerton a couple of days ago. I would expect the Kansas City Public Schools general obligation bonds to pass as well coming up on Tuesday. Doesn't mean it should, but it probably will. But then you also have this when it comes to what exactly is going to happen with these tax assessments. And the first thing that needs to happen, and it's what Sean Smith said yesterday on the show, Jackson County Legislature, well, people at the top got to go.
Frankly, it demands the resignation of the people that were responsible from the top all the way down.
Yep. Frank White has to resign. It's not controversial at this point. It's really not indisputable at this point. This cannot be solved and it cannot continue on until Frank White is gone and Gail McCann Beatty is out as well. She's the Jackson County assessor. And Sean Smith gave us a little nugget yesterday. If you missed the interview, it's up on the podcast, Apple or Spotify. Just subscribe to the podcast there so you can hear it back yourself. He said yesterday that he thought Gail McCann Beatty, who is the assessor for Jackson County, has tried to resign on a couple of occasions, but Frank won't let her, which is nuts. It's like you can't tell somebody they can't resign. Now, maybe she feels loyal to him, so she's hanging around a little bit. But how much crap is she going to keep taking? At some point, she's got to be like, yeah, this ain't worth it. Frank, you're on your own. I appreciate your loyalty. Thanks for the gig. I really screwed this whole thing up, but I'm out. I'm done. Sayonara, see you later. That's what she's got to do. But Frank, I think, is using her in some ways for protection. She spoke to the media this week. He did not. But she's getting played for a sucker here, and apparently she's the last one to realize it. If she goes, I think this house of cards collapses. Frank will go shortly thereafter. I do believe that. She's just got to, make that move first. And then I think this thing will start to snowball at the very top. And then hopefully this county can start to get itself back on track in some respect. It was Liberation Day, as it was dubbed yesterday by President Trump at the White House. Tariffs of 10% across the board going into effect April 5th. That's 2 days from now, 12:01 a.m. Eastern time in the morning. And then, of course, individual reciprocal tariffs on the countries with which the United States has the largest trade deficits. All the countries will continue to be subject to the original 10% tariff baseline. So this comes down yesterday. We all knew it was coming. And the important thing that has to happen here, because it is a high-risk, high-reward gamble that is being taken by the White House, is having a united front and going on as many media outlets as you possibly can go on to explain it. So first there was Trump yesterday at the White House talking about the reciprocal tariffs and the plans behind them.
But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick.
Oh, the great Howard.
Thanks.
We love you, Howard.
So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing.
My hair's flying all over.
Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge.
So that was Trump yesterday in a very Trumpian way of doing the weave, as it's dubbed, in the Rose Garden, talking about Liberation Day and the tariffs. And just from a pure fairness perspective, he's right to point out that, listen, we've never charged anybody. We're not, even our reciprocal tariffs are not at the same levels that we get tariffed by these countries. So what's your case against it? The S&P might take a hit. I love Liz Clayman. She was our guest last hour, Fox Business Network, the Clayman Countdown. And she was really harping on the fact that, well, don't look at your 401k, those close to retirement. Oh, watch out. If you're close to retirement, you should not be fully invested in the equity markets anyway. Like that's on you. Now, if you're me and God willing, you got another 30 years to work, I'm just not looking at it. Okay, I got 30 years of runway here. I'm not worried that the S&P is down, 3% over the past month. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about what the economy is going to look like for the next 30 years, not what my portfolio is going to look like in 3 days. because all that does is make me feel better about myself. It doesn't actually do anything, right? I mean, it's not like I'm going to go make some lavish purchase because my 401k that I can't touch for 23 years is up a little bit. And frankly, I think that's the game that Trump is playing here. And for most people who just might have a little money in a 401k, they're not freaking out over a Wall Street dip today. Because over the long run, this can be beneficial potentially. I'm not guaranteeing it. No one can guarantee it. We've seen tariffs fail. But over the long run, it can be beneficial for Wall Street and, more importantly, Main Street. That's what it can be. And that's what the potential is here. And that's the basically risk that Donald Trump is taking right now. He's also looking at these numbers here. That trade accounts for 73% of Mexico's GDP, 67% of Canada's GDP, 37% of China's GDP, and only 24% of our GDP. So it's a much lower percentage of our GDP that is trade versus, say, Mexico, Canada, China, and basically every other country in the world. Trump believes, and he's right to believe this, it's a fact, from a leverage perspective, they need us more than we need them. And that's what every business deal is. It's leverage. Whoever has more of it has the advantage. And Trump is of the belief that we have more of it, so guess what? We may and will over time get our way. That's his belief. And I actually think what he wants is free and fair trade. But that's not what we've had for a long time. The notion that we're imposing tariffs and we are creating an environment that is no longer free trade, we do not have free trade already. That's one thing that we have learned courtesy of this administration. Free trade does not exist. It's not in play right now. We should get to a place where we truly have it, but we don't have it right now. The problem here and the risk that is being taken here is that Trump puts these tariffs in. The ultimate goal is to get more manufacturing and more business in the United States, right? More blue-collar jobs back to the U.S. The unions can currently benefit tremendously from this. The question, though, is how many people, first off, will develop skill sets after these manufacturers potentially come back to the States? Can they fill the jobs? You look at blue-collar jobs right now in America, we need tens of thousands of tradesmen in this country today. You can't find them. Let's be honest. You go look at people working on homes right now, a lot of them don't speak English. And you can say it's because it's cheap labor. That's partially true. But let's be honest, Americans are lazy inherently, and they aren't wanting to do these jobs. It's not right because there's a lot of very talented people in this country who should be, doing some of these jobs instead of going to 4-year colleges and learning nothing and then ending up with $100,000 in debt and believing that there's 17 genders. Like, that is true. We have done a poor job guiding our future generations into places where, one, you can make money, and two, you actually have skill sets. We don't do that anymore. Just go to college, go to college, go to college. That's not for everybody, and it's not how you can actually make the most money in today's economy. So that takes, that's a generational shift. You don't change that with tariffs. And that's obviously got to be part of the thought process here for the administration as they put this plan together. They can change course on this. I'm going to support him on this because Trump ran on this. And I voted for him for a third time, knowing full well that he was going to implement these and this was going to be part of his economic strategy. So I've got his back on this. But it would be naive to not admit there is a lot of risk involved in it. The downside, obviously, is that it sparks some more inflation or stagflation, also on the table. And it leads to a further softening of the economy. And the Democrats use it to their advantage, and they blow it out in the midterms in 26. The upside is it is a generational reset for the American economy. We do bring jobs back to the United States. There is a growth for the middle class and Main Street in this country, and it sets up the Republican Party potentially for many election cycles to come. That's the upside. And the question is, which way is it going to fall? 913-408-7957 on KCMO Talk Radio. Before we hit the break, let's get to John in Independence. Go ahead, John. You're on KCMO.
You know what, Pete? Back when I was in school years ago, when they, in like history class, they talked about like economic stuff like from the 19th century. Of course, it was really boring, but they really didn't go into specific detail what tariffs actually used to do for the country. Now, I know that we used to get all of our revenue from tariffs, but why did they stop using them if they were doing, a good thing for the country? And I think it'd be nice if somebody could kind of like explain the history of tariffs to the American people. They might understand this more fully and might accept it even more. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. And that's where they've got to go in a media blitz. And I don't just mean like Fox, right? I mean like they've got to go, thank you, John, they've got to go in a media blitz all over the country. Kind of like Doge last week. We talked about that great Doge interview that Elon and his, a dozen merry men did last week with Brett Baer. That's all well and good. It was a fantastic interview. But the Doge folks should be going everywhere they can to talk to people about this stuff. Same thing with these tariffs. And John's right. You've got to sell this because if not, you know what the media is doing. Now, the media is totally disingenuous on their coverage here. The same people who didn't bat an eye over 20% inflation over 4 years, said it was transitory, said it wasn't that big of a deal, said just don't worry about it, it's going to be fine, it's not actually that bad, vote for Kamala. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, but the prices of things are going to go up. Where you been the last 5 years, you chumps? It's like, come on, please. Spare me the whole, I'm really worried about the prices for regular folks thing when you didn't give a rip about it for the last 4 years. And you were celebrating the fact that Wall Street was going bonkers because they were living on a sugar high of printed money that we don't have. So please, I'm not here for that song and dance. So they're full of it. We've always known that. But still, if people aren't feeling better about their situation, they will not reward you politically. It's not always just interesting what people say. It's interesting what they don't say. And I looked at some of our local members of Congress here, specifically those on, the other side of Donald Trump, like Emmanuel Cleaver and Sharice Davids. And, Emmanuel Cleaver suddenly found social media. He suddenly found a little bit of gumption. He's got his cojones back, it seems like now, with a Republican in the White House. He was almost as asleep as Joe Biden was over the last few years, it seemed like.
Come on, man.
He was. But now, with Trump in there, Cleaver's been very active on his social media. And obviously, he's been going viral as well.
You mustard moo.
So I looked at his social pages yesterday to see if he had anything regarding the tariffs. And he had nothing. Now, he's still freaking out about made-up controversies like defunding Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare and things like that. And he's upset with RFK Jr. And he did stand yesterday with members of the Black Caucus to highlight what he calls the devastating impact Republican cuts to Social Security will have on black families nationwide. He did do that. But nothing yesterday. And by the way, we're not talking about cuts to Social Security unless Emmanuel Cleaver's, 120-year-old father is still collecting a check under somebody else's name. I don't know what you would be upset about when it comes to getting rid of fraud out of Social Security. No one's coming for the Social Security payments on American citizens who are black or white or Latino or Asian. But once again, don't let that get in the way of a good narrative. And Emmanuel Cleaver's never done that. So he had nothing yesterday about the tariffs. I thought that was interesting. Sharice Davids. Now, she's not nearly as active lately on social media as Emmanuel Cleaver has been. Nothing from her either. In fact, the last thing she's got on there is a video of her boxing. So she's really got the pulse of the people right now. Nothing from her either on these tariffs being the worst thing ever. So I'm just sitting there and I'm saying to myself, why might that be? Is this hysteria largely fabricated by media? Because if this was actually the thing that Democrats in Congress thought was going to give them a huge lift in the polls, you would have our two local representatives at the very least posting on Twitter, X, whatever it is, about it, right? At the very least, they'd be talking about this and putting something up saying they disagree with it. Nothing from Cleaver or Davids on the Missouri side and the Kansas side. Ask yourself why that might be. So it's not just about what people say, it's about what they don't say. That can tell a story here. 913-408-7957. John is in Topeka. What's up, John? You're on KCMO.
Good morning, Pete. Hey, I was thinking about something. Trump is in the same situation as Sam Brownback. Trump's trying to do these policies and get things enacted, but he's got a bunch of rhinos out there that he can't depend on to help him get this agenda through. And Sam Brownback went through the same thing. He had a bunch of rhinos that wouldn't make the cuts, so he had to make hard cuts. And everybody's like, Brownback's bad. Oh, he's cutting this. He's cutting that. Oh. And then look at it here years later. There's Laura Kelly running on Sam Brownback's tax proposals. But he did and acted and got pushed through. And now Kansas has a budget surplus of $4 billion. And they're working forward, knowing that the money's coming in. And that was all Brownback's tax plan, but nobody talks about that. They're like, oh, Laura Kelly's doing a great job fiscally. No.
Well, no. Hold on. They rolled back Brownback's tax plan, and they have a surplus because of all the COVID money that got poured into these states.
Well, yes, but the thing about it is they rolled it back, but that's what Brownback's plan was to start rolling it back eventually, and then. But here's
the mistake. Here's the mistake Brownback made. Okay, you're right. They cut the taxes super fast, and they didn't cut the spending enough. He shouldn't have signed the bill in the first place, knowing full well they weren't cutting spending enough.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
And Trump's not. I mean, Trump's doing exactly what he wants to do. I mean, Republicans aren't getting in his way on tariffs. They're not doing it. I mean, they don't have to do anything. He can just implement the tariffs. So tell me how Congress is impeding what he's trying to do on tariffs.
Well, I'm just sitting there seeing that there's some simulation. Similar things with Brownback and Trump that Trump's got going on with him. That he has the rhinos up there that will walk out on him in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I see more unity in the Republican Party than we saw at all during his first 4 years. I mean, I think most Republicans have gotten in line behind the guy after what happened in November. I just don't get that sense, John.
Well, I kind of see it with those four that didn't voted along with the rest of the Democrats to walk out or here just recently on the budget there on whatever they were doing. But anyhow, I just see the similarities with the rhinos and Brownback and Trump, and I'm like, man, I hope this works, and it will work. I mean, 10 years from now, it'll probably be a success, but it'll be somebody else claiming success, but not giving Trump any credit whatsoever.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Here's the tough part of this as well, and Trump has alluded to this in interviews. He's like, we go quarter by quarter in this country. China has a 100-year plan. Part of that is because, we've got the stock markets, and obviously that's a big part of people's savings and whatnot, and that does matter. But the other part of it is, listen, when you got a president and President Xi who can just be there for as long as he wants, you can put together a 100-year plan. Our system's not built like that. That's largely for the better, but I do understand what he's saying in terms of how it makes it difficult to govern. 9:51, final few minutes. Kevin Keatsman uncanceled at 10 o'clock. I have not played this yet this morning. Kelly Means, he is a top advisor to RFK Jr. and the Department of Health and Human Services. He sat down with a Politico reporter yesterday, and he just totally owned her. That's the best way to put it. And he talked about the health outcomes in this country being absolute garbage, We're spending more on healthcare than all other high-income countries, and what do we have to show for it? Nothing. We are on more drugs than ever before in this country. We are fatter than ever before in this country. This bureaucracy has failed. Now, listen, individuals have to make better decisions too, but when you're talking about things like getting yellow 5 out of food and the addictive nature of a lot of the food that we are consuming out of what we eat every single day, to me, that's not political. It shouldn't be. Of course, Trump's doing it, so to some people, it's got to be political. But here was Callie Means and a political reporter yesterday.
Right. What do you say to people in the public who are concerned now about drug safety, about whether we're prepared for the next pandemic when these cuts have happened so hard, so fast?
Yeah, I'd say to the reporters in the room and the lobbyists in the room, I mean, obviously make your case, but I'd truly ask for, as you're making it, a little bit of humility about what the voters were trying to say by putting Bobby Kennedy Jr. in this position of power. I would a little bit of humility to ask why Bobby Kennedy, along with President Trump, are the two most popular political figures in America by far. What the voters are trying to say, and I think they were right, is that the system is really on the wrong track. That the existing health authorities, just demonstrably, the NIH oversaw, and this is just consensus at this point, the literal creation of a pandemic. The NIH, whose goal is to promote American health, has overseen a devastation, just an abject devastation in American health over the past 20 years, with disease rates skyrocketing in America, leading the world of almost every single chronic disease, with rates of nearly every single chronic disease being at an all-time high among kids. There's been very little innovation with small pharma, with innovative therapeutics at the FDA. It costs $1 billion to get through the process. CMS is an agency that's much larger budget than the Defense Department, that's controlled by the American Medical Association, which is a pharmaceutical lobbying group and is almost predominantly sick care. So there's real problems. And when you turn on CNBC, it's just a nonstop. It's a nonstop infomercial for pharma. It's a Sky Rizzi commercial followed by Scott Gottlieb saying how Bobby's killing people, followed by a breathless coverage of the measles outbreak and no mention of the mental health crisis.
How does cutting a bunch of HHS solve that problem?
It is insane. It is insane for you to insinuate that the thing standing between us and better health is more government bureaucrats. That's
not what I meant. That's not what I meant.
That is what everyone's saying. It is absolutely insane to insinuate that it's some crime.
It's not all bureaucrats. It's a lot of scientists. It's researchers. It's people who are making sure that
those scientists fundamentally have overseen, just demonstrably, a record of utter failure. It would be insane. Is that funny? Not true. Is that not true? I'd love to hear how, so what metrics would you guys point to for how the scientific community, how the 4 times more per capita on healthcare spending that we spend in America versus other countries has produced innovation? Has there been one single chronic disease medication in modern American history that has lowered rates of the chronic disease? It is appropriate that the American Academy of Pediatrics right now, which is 90% funded by pharma, is pushing Ozempic on 6-year-olds.
So, Kelly,
that is what the medical authorities are doing.
Why not then use the power that you guys have to push the existing infrastructure in that direction instead of slashing it altogether?
It's not slashing. It's taking it back to 2017 levels. That's not slashing. The amount of bureaucrats...
More like 2002 levels, actually.
In many cases, it's actually just not that much. But it is cutting, what is it, 20,000 people? It's taking the HHS back to 68,000 employees. It is absolutely the idea that Bobby Kennedy should not come in and make dramatic changes to the leadership and the personnel at these authorities that have overseen an abject devastation of American health, which the lobbyists in this room do not have the humility to admit that we have gone completely wrong. The lobbyists in this room laughing when we have the sickest children in the developed world. If that is your attitude, and your attitude is to tell the Maha moms that their votes and their voice is not legitimate, that we need dramatic changes to American healthcare, if you think it is illegitimate for Bobby Kennedy to not make big changes to people like Peter Marks, who once again and again went against FDA advisory opinions, who fired the 2 top vaccine makers, the 2 top vaccine scientists at the FDA for suggesting that we shouldn't mandate COVID shots for soldiers, who continually went against expert opinion in favor of the pharmaceutical industry, who many people here we're collaborating with him with. The fact that somebody like that can't be fired and he can't install tremendous people like Marty McCary and Jay Bhattacharya and Dr. Oz to start reforming these agencies and put in their people, of course he should do that. That's what people voted for.
That is a masterclass from Callie Means, HHS advisor to RFK. And I think I'm married to a Maha mom. The other day I said, where are the plastic knives for the girls? Throw them out. Microplastics. Okay. All right. Fine. I get it. See you later. Kevin Keatsman is next.